Right, so the world of wrestling really can be the Wild West sometimes. There's bidding wars, there's backstage fights, shady business tactics, shady promoters, hot dogs, handshakes, you know, all sorts. But one thing about wrestling is that in the grand scheme of things, it's actually quite hard to burn a bridge. You could be hard to work with, you could refuse to take losses, you could be a dick backstage, and that isn't going to lose you any booking. I mean, unless you're a criminal, it's pretty hard to burn a bridge in wrestling. I mean, hey, there's still criminals involved in wrestling. But obviously there's an exception to every rule, and there are a few wrestlers in the world of wrestling who seemingly burnt bridges and had some messy exits with their main promotions, and maybe might not be brought back to them in the future because of that. The stories in today's videos about the bridges that were burnt range from petty reasoning to just outright craziness, so like and subscribe as we discuss the first infamous bridge burn in wrestling, and that was none other than Low-Ki with New Japan Pro Wrestling. Quick preface before we get to this bit, there may be a limited lack of actual photos of New Japan Pro Wrestling because I'm at risk of getting copyrighted if I do use them, so just be aware of that before we get into this segment. Low-Ki is a guy who is a very infamous name in wrestling, and that's because he's a guy who seemingly didn't know wrestling was a work. Low-Ki is often described as someone who was always just in full wrestler mode. He never switched off. And that made him very hard to work with. He was a bit of a mark for himself, he had an attitude backstage, he was very stubborn, often refused to lose, and had many a tantrum, some caught on camera. And as Low-Ki went through his career knocking wrestlers out and getting into fights and all sorts of issues, it led to bridges being burnt. Most specifically is the bridge that he had with New Japan Pro Wrestling, which was a great spot for him to be in. Fresh out of the WWE following his failed run there in 2010, he returned back to New Japan Pro Wrestling, and I can't stress enough that Low-Ki at this time is just the perfect fit for New Japan. He's a great worker, he hits hard, and he can more than hold his own in Japan as one of the biggest stars. However, it's always his attitude that got in the way, and that was no different with New Japan Pro Wrestling, as his attitude really got in the way of his New Japan Pro Wrestling career and pretty much killed it. So the scene is Wrestle Kingdom 7 on January 4th, 2013, as Low-Ki is unsuccessfully challenging Prince Devitt and Kota Ibushi for the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship, and he wrestled the entire match in a suit looking like Agent 47 straight out of Hitman, and this would end up being his final match with New Japan Pro Wrestling, as his profile was removed the following month and he has never since returned to the promotion. And fans were left wondering, why did he wrestle at Wrestle Kingdom in a suit? He's never done that in his entire career. And as it turns out, Low-Ki did this without the permission of anyone in New Japan and out of protest, in fact. Basically, the story goes that New Japan were running a show, a future show, in Fukushima in Japan. Just 2 years prior in Fukushima, there was a nuclear accident, and Low-Ki had told New Japan officials that he did not want to wrestle at this upcoming event due to reservations stemming from that disaster. Obviously, New Japan Pro Wrestling told him, no bro, you're gonna work that show, you work for us, you can't just back out of it. And Low-Ki, out of protest, turned up at Wrestle Kingdom 7 dressed as Agent 47. New Japan was furious with Low-Ki because, like I said, he never cleared with them to work the match in a suit, and that is the last we've ever seen of Low-Ki in New Japan Pro Wrestling. I have a full video on Low-Ki's career if you want to hear more about all the other bridges he burnt in his career and the other temper tantrums he had. As he has had quite the roller coaster of a career, I would recommend checking that out. But yeah, the story of Low-Ki and his exit from New Japan Pro Wrestling never ceases to amaze me. Next up though is someone who was one of the biggest acquisitions in the years-long WWE versus AEW bidding wars there has been from the side of WWE, as just days after they wrestled at AEW's 2024 Forbidden Door event, Stephanie Vaquer was snapped up by WWE, and as of last night is now their WWE Women's Champion. Stephanie Vaquer is undoubtedly a star, maybe one of my favorites in wrestling today, but she also had quite the messy exit from CMLL, the Lucha Libre company she worked for prior to going to WWE. Stephanie Vaquer began her wrestling career as early as 2009 throughout Chile, her home country, as she eventually moved to Mexico and started working for CMLL in 2019. She formed a tag team with Zeus and became one of the top stars in CMLL and basically the top woman in CMLL at the time, and this led to her getting work outside of CMLL. She was doing stuff with New Japan Pro Wrestling. It's here at New Japan Pro Wrestling at their Resurgence event where she faced Mercedes Moné for the first time, and she also did work for Stardom in Japan, and her work with New Japan Pro Wrestling led to her defeating Julia to capture the Strong Women's Championship, as she became a triple champion between CMLL and New Japan Pro Wrestling and was perhaps the biggest female star outside of WWE and AEW at that time. And when you're a woman holding 3 belts in wrestling, that of course means that Mercedes Moné is going to be calling your name, and sure enough, Stephanie Vaquer around Forbidden Door season in 2024 would resume her feud with Mercedes Moné that had started years prior in New Japan, as she made her AEW debut on the May 29, 2024 episode of Dynamite, confronting Mercedes Moné as a match was made between the two at Forbidden Door in a winner-takes-all match. Vaquer also had an AEW in-ring debut on Collision, defeating Lady Frost leading up to the show, and at Forbidden Door, herself and Mercedes Moné tore the house down, with Mercedes Moné picking up the win. It was huge exposure for Stephanie Vaquer, her biggest match to date so far, and she looked like a damn star out there, and you know who else took notice of that was none other than WWE, of course, because as rumors started to arise that AEW was interested in signing Stephanie Vaquer post Forbidden Door, it also arose that WWE was actually leading the race to get her signature. Stephanie Vaquer was at Mercedes Moné's after party negotiating the contract, and sure enough, WWE swooped in and got the deal done quickly, as Stephanie Vaquer had just essentially been stolen by WWE in one of the biggest acquisitions in the bidding war, and safe to say Stephanie Vaquer has obviously gone on to kill it since then. However, her signing with WWE led to quite a messy exit with CMLL, as on July 10th, 2024, before WWE on that same day announced that she had signed, CMLL had revealed that Stephanie Vaquer was leaving the company due to personal reasons, meaning both the World Championship and the Women's Tag Championships were being vacated as a result, and Stephanie Vaquer was also missing upcoming bookings with CMLL and Rev Pro and other indies as a result too. And according to the Wrestling Observer, Stephanie Vaquer received heat from CMLL and New Japan for unfulfilled obligations, with both companies being very upset at the sudden signing. New Japan were unhappy because they had advertised her for a show they were doing for a few months, in a championship match no less, and many claim that this probably caused Vaquer to burn bridges with New Japan Pro Wrestling and CMLL. But I'm not gonna lie, as much as I don't think Stephanie Vaquer is never gonna leave WWE at least anytime soon, if she ever was, I think she could easily still go back to CMLL and New Japan and AEW of course as well. I don't think that bridge is truly burnt, I just think we'll never actually get to answer whether it is burnt, because I don't think she's gonna leave WWE anytime soon, so we'll never know. But bro, CMLL, they had Tessa Blanchard at one point. They're not gonna burn the bridge with Stephanie Vaquer, I'm sure. If Stephanie Vaquer left WWE tomorrow, she could easily return to CMLL and New Japan. I don't think it would be stopped. And the final one to talk about is a run that I learned about recently, and a major bridge burn that I also learned about recently is Ric Flair with Ring of Honor. Right, so do you remember when Ric Flair fake retired from WWE? They did that emotional ass Shawn Michaels match at WrestleMania 24 that he lost. I'm sorry, I love you, and it was all emotional, and he bowed out of wrestling just to return to TNA years later. So yeah, Ric Flair retired from WWE in 2008 and then came back in 2010, but between that time there was a bit of an awkward phase where Ric Flair was just doing all sorts of side quests, and one of those was with Ring of Honor. As in March of 2009, he would make his Ring of Honor debut, and soon after he would become an authority figure in the company, appearing on Ring of Honor's weekly show as well and their pay-per-view events. It's a forgotten time in Ric Flair's career and in Ring of Honor's run as well. I actually wasn't familiar with this whatsoever. This was a time when Ring of Honor had guys like Danielson, Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, Kenny Omega, and now Ric Flair was there as well. It's a crazy mesh of people. However, Ric Flair's run with Ring of Honor was very short, and after a couple of months he stopped appearing for the company, and at the start of 2010 it was then announced that Ring of Honor were filing a lawsuit against Ric Flair, as apparently Ric Flair had no-showed an event in Canada and then went on to fail to make several more appearances as Ring of Honor's ambassador, as it was claims that Ric Flair owed the promotion over $40,000 as he was contractually obligated to make 5 appearances for Ring of Honor, with each appearance being for $10K, and Ring of Honor argued they had paid Flair $35K and he only made 1 scheduled appearance, before he then told the company he had to leave because he was returning to WWE, which of course didn't happen. He had some one-off appearances for WWE, but ended up going to TNA. The lawsuit would get dropped as Carrie Silkin, the Ring of Honor owner, sold Ring of Honor to Sinclair Broadcasting in 2011, and Carrie Silkin to this day claims that Ric Flair still owes him $41,000 for missing 4 signing appearances. I think all in all, this is probably the least surprising bridge burn in history. Ric Flair obviously never went back to Ring of Honor following this failure to make these appearances. He of course went to TNA, and in fact even before that he did that Australia tour with Hulk Hogan where he returned to wrestling there, and he's gone on to do appearances with WWE and was even signed to AEW just a year or so ago as well, so he actually was pretty close to Ring of Honor again, given that AEW owns Ring of Honor. But obviously pre-Tony Khan purchased Ring of Honor, they never brought Ric Flair back and never were, and I'm just amazed that they were paying Ric Flair $10K per appearance. An indie company paying an on-screen authority figure $10K per appearance is just insane. But yeah, probably the least surprising bridge burn you've heard about today. It's Ric Flair, for fuck's sake. But that's it from me in this video today, talking about some of the most infamous bridge burns in wrestling history. If you did enjoy this video, then be sure to smash the like button on it and subscribe notifications on so you never miss a video on the Top 10 Wrestling channel. Comment down below your thoughts on this video and any future content you want to see from me. I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye and keep on rolling.